Rome lit streets with burning Christians by the hundreds. Now it's the Catholic capital. Aztecs sliced out still beating hearts by the thousands, but the free tribes are still here. Nazis skinned Jews to make lampshades, but synagogues still stand. Tribal Africans were sold in slave ships. Now their ancestors captain the American fleet. Modern women murder their own unborn, but each year they kill less. The Nahash still sizzles in the electronic knowledge tree, and the dragon wars openly on the lady's genetic seed. But the Didache for apprentice Christians opens with, there are two ways, the way of life and the way of death, and they are vastly different. The way is hard, the path is straight, the journey long, but those who were last will be first. There are still crucifixions, but they are no longer in the road lining Rome. The Colosseum celebrated carnage is gone, and the mob still ravages and rapes, but in underground, on isolated islands, warehouses, and mansions. The devil and its worshippers are still here, but out of style. Human nature is unchanged, but human civilization has, because the Savior's secret is succinct. The more vulnerable we become, the more invincible God makes us. Ex-DEA and DIA retired SOCOM soldier, deep state targeted, turned whistleblower warrior, sabotaged and slandered, betrayed and saved, rejected and redeemed. As teacher and truth teller, now America's intelligence officer, following God, leading my family, and any that choose to join on our long walk to faith and freedom. Welcome. I'm Jeff Prather, and this is the Prather Point. Howdy, everybody. Lots to cover today. My challenge to my critics. Trump replaces promises with an arch. Critics confirm my cult contention. DOD to Ford. More weapons, less cars. And we are losing our two-nation Russia proxy war. And you may not believe the Bible end times, but the cabal certainly does. They are all in. And very special guest coming on, longtime CIA veteran and critic of CIA as well, Ray McGovern. So if you didn't see my post or my Substack on Tuesday, I'd ask you to please go look at that. It was very controversial. It's entitled, Trump Deleted Jesus Post Reveals Much. And I basically, in summary, in a long statement and on Substack, said that there is a movement to make Trump as a messiah, and that I have noticed, in fact, I'll read exactly what I said there. I've noticed lately I've been struck by ever-Trumper's strange messianic devotion to POTUS, as if criticizing him is heretical. Now I know why. And I talk in detail about that and about the Trump as Jesus image, how that came out of Truth Social, and how there is a cult around Trump. And I think it originates inside Truth Social, because the Trump as Jesus post was there since February, and it was fine. It was only when it was taken out of there. And so I make a very rational, clear argument of why I say this. And I also say pray for Trump. And I also say I was a supporter of Trump. And I got a lot of positive feedback, actually, more than I thought. But I also got a lot of negative feedback. And all of the negative feedback actually confirmed everything I was contending. My contention was there are a group of people who are simply worshiping Trump as Messiah, and any criticism of Trump is trashing Trump, and it's heresy, and it's not allowed. And so that's exactly what I got. And I no actual rational debate, just insults and criticisms. And generally speaking, especially on X, if you want to debate me, I'm fine for you to debate me. If you want me to teach, I'm fine to do that. When I make a mistake, I'm open to correction. But I'm not going to just let you curse me. And I'm not just going to let you insult me. I'll try and have a debate, but every one of my critics was simply emotional, which confirmed my contention that they are cultists, which I don't know that they understand that. I don't know if they even understand debate anymore, but there used to be debate classes. You can watch The Great Debaters with Denzel Washington. You might even take a position in a high school debate class in the old days that you disagreed with, but it was learning how to bring a logical, rational argument, not like today. It's kind of like Monty Python. The Monty Python skit, for those of you who remember Monty Python, is, hey, you're not logically, rationally debating me. You're just simply negating everything I say. No, I'm not. So I put out a challenge on X. Here's my challenge to Protestant evangelical Zionists. I'm calling them PEZ, who change scripture. Prove me wrong. Show where I was mistaken when pointing out PEZ changed scripture. So I'm talking about like Huckabee replacing Israel with the word you in Genesis 12:3, for example. 2, debate me with rational arguments that I have unfairly characterized or misjudged Trump as Messiah cultists. So far, all I've gotten is hate mail and insults, which are a failed debater's last resort. To help, I'm republishing my Substack here so you can read what I actually wrote and spoke. So the whole thing there is on X because I think this was a paid post. I have some unpaid posts. All my sermons are unpaid, but you can take a look at that and let me know. And I'm totally open to correction, and I'm totally open to debate. But so far, that's not what I've gotten. I've gotten hate, I've gotten insults and distractions, but nobody has actually addressed the issues, which is what I expect. Further, Trump has replaced his promises with an arch. So as a reminder, stolen 2020 election, nothing. J6 footage, nothing. Chemtrail ban, nothing. Fixed rigged elections, nothing. Doge refunds, nothing. Build the wall, stopped. Hillary in jail if elected, nothing. Tariffs to replace income tax, no movement. Russiagate accountability, which really it should be the first thing he does, nothing. Mass deportations, I think those kind of did happen. Term limits, nothing. Deep state arrests, none. There was no deep state war ever launched. COVID crime arrest, no. And that's democide by biological weapon. Drain the swamp, nope. Fort Knox gold, nope. mRNA ban, nope. Corrupt FBI accountability, nope. Instead, we are getting a arch, and the arch is being announced today. So those are all valid, rational, fact-based criticisms of Trump. But Trump cultists seem to think that there's some kind of heresy to dare to criticize their Messiah. And they never seem to answer these things. So again, and if I forgot to mention the kidnapping, rape, torture, murder, and cannibalism of children by the Epstein class, the protection thereof by Trump and the DOJ and the AG and the new AG, then that's at the top of the list, of my list as a Christian. So if you are choosing Trump instead of choosing the prosecution to be brought to justice, those who murder children, then you can't call yourself a Christian. You can call yourself a PEZ, a Protestant evangelical Zionist, but you should stop calling yourself a Christian, because it's very clear. Yeshua, Jesus' real name, says better that anybody who harms a hair on one of the head of these children be thrown into the sea with a millstone around their neck, which means they're going to be punished heavily. So if you can't justify those two things, then just admit, what you are. And I'm coining the term. I'm not going to call them American Christian Zionist anymore, because they're really not Christian. They never quote Yeshua in the New Testament. All they do is misquote and mangle Torah, Old Testament, Hebrew Bibles, which of course is irrelevant now because it has been fulfilled by Yeshua. Snowbird, Trump is not my Messiah, but he is my president. And he's my president, too. And I'm saying pray for him. And I'm saying to the troops that are deploying into Iran, you can't, if they got to go to Iran, now's not the time to protest. Commander-in-Chief says you go. And Trump is Commander-in-Chief. That's my take. And I'm open to debate. And I've tried that with several people, but they've just turned to insults. I don't know whether they are so brainwashed they don't know, or they don't know about debate, or they don't understand rational argument. But so far, all of my critics unanimously have confirmed, what I was saying. Also, it's important to acknowledge that DOD is asking Ford to build more weapons, not more cars. So this is a tell. They're talking about, peace negotiations. Of course, you don't have official diplomats there. You've got Kushner and Witkoff, real estate guys who are going to carve up Gaza. And now Israel is Gazaing Lebanon as well for the Greater Israel Project. The Greater Israel Project is a religious eschatological project. That's why there's no rationality to it. It's a belief system. When this is another big tell is when you put all these forces into the region, spend all kinds of money and effort to get them there, it's likely you are going to use them. What's the probability? Probability is 90%. Now, he could be applying pressure, leverage, which is how he used to negotiate from a position of strength. That's good. But it seems unlikely because he keeps bringing even more troops there. But another confirmation is the fact that all of a sudden the Pentagon is turning around and saying, hey, GM, Ford, other large manufacturers, you need to shift from auto development to weapons and military supply production. What does that connotates? A long war. And of course, saying this is going to be over a couple of weeks is a complete lie. This is mission creep. This is the same thing that happens every time. Happened in Afghanistan, happened in Iraq, happened in Vietnam. This is an unfortunate tell of where things are going. And again, I was U.S. Army intelligence officer. I was a DI intelligence officer. Now I've designated myself as America's intelligence officer. So I'm going to give you the truth, the ruthless truth, as I know it. And I'm going to try and bring it to you, whether you like it or not. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And, that's why my audience has dropped in size quite a bit and why I've gotten criticized quite a bit. But that's the way it goes. The other thing I want to talk about briefly is we are losing our two-nation proxy war with Russia. And I want you to think about this in regards to, we have long been in a proxy war with Russia through Ukraine, CIA, through the election, the Maidan color revolution, put that, cross-dressing Zelensky in there. It really resembles the Biden election. It's a coup. And since then, we've had a proxy war with Russia, but we also now have a proxy war out of Iran. And you say, well, we don't have troops on the ground. Well, we actually have had some troops on the ground. And of course, there's the rescue. And of course, there's the air war and the naval war, but there's the cyber war. So not only did the Ukraine war escalate as a proxy war, and there were U.S. troops involved. There were U.S. troops before, during, after. I talked about that. I talked about there was a National Guard Oklahoma unit training. They got out of there, but there were specialized units. I was in a precursor to ISA back in the day, Foreign Operations Group. Those go in and prep the battlefield, intelligence preparation of the battlefield, IPB. But we are now in a two-war proxy war with Russia, and we are losing both. We're certainly losing in Ukraine. and we are losing in Iran. And so just be aware of that. And the final thing before I get to my guest, because I'm really excited about this guest, is that you may not believe in end times or revelation, but the CABAL, as in Kabbalah, certainly does. Everything they are doing is to bring about scriptural truth in revelation. They're making all of this happen. That goes along with the Trump as Messiah post. That goes along with the gold ark of the covenant at Mar-a-Lago. That goes along with everybody starting to turn against Israel. Peter Thiel, doing in 2025, doing seminars on the Antichrist, one in Rome, not at the Vatican, but in Rome. You can't miss that significance. So just be aware of all those things. This is my story. Trump is bringing in the false light. People are so deceived by what is happening right in front of their faces. I think so. But, as I said, pray for President Trump. Pray for Hegseth. But they are, they're not Christians. I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian chaplain. And so I have a duty as a Christian and then a right as an American citizen, especially as a combat veteran, to criticize President, my commander-in-chief, which I say he's my president, he's my commander-in-chief, but I have a right to criticize him. And if you say I do not, and you say I'm trashing Trump or whatever, you're part of the cult that I'm accusing you of, and all you're doing is affirming my contention. So I hope you guys can see that. T-Box, Ray McGovern stated the problem of Iraq prior to the first war back in 1991. Nothing has changed. That is true. That's why I've got him on. All the billionaires are working together, and we are losing our rights, and we can thank Trump for this mess. Well, the mess was there before Trump, but Trump said he would change it, and I think he was trying to do so in the first Trump administration, but by the second, he was changed. And again, I think going by the old intelligence acronym MICE, which I talked about in my last show, and it's in my Substack, which is Money, Influence, Coercion, and Ego, which is an old intel, is how you assess somebody with human intelligence, because I was a human guy, is I think it's C and E in Trump's case. And I think that went through Israel and then is through this Protestant evangelical Zionist movement. I want to say clearly, I was raised Catholic. I came out of Catholic orphanage, went to Catholic grade school, high school, even college at the beginning. I'm very grateful to my Catholic faith. I'm not a Catholic now. I consider Catholics Christians. I consider Protestants Christians. I'm talking about a very specific group, Protestant evangelical Zionists, not everybody. And I'm not trying to insult anybody either. I'm just telling you what's going on. And again, everything I say is spiritually based. That's really important. But also, this administration and all of these oligarchs are spiritually based in evil, and they are definitely following Scripture, and they are bringing Scripture to reality. Just like when you see somebody who, is a drug addict or somebody's always getting in trouble, and you say, and your daughter or something's going to date him, and you're like, that guy's going to be more trouble because you can see how he's going to act. Well, that's what God can see happening there is as these guys try and make this happen. But anyway, I want to get to my guest because I'm really excited about this guest. Ray McGovern was born August 25th, 1939. He's an American political activist and former Central Intelligence Agency analyst. And in the 1980s, he chaired the National Intelligence Estimates. That's a big deal in the intelligence world, the NIEs. The big dogs write those, and participated in the president's daily brief. That's a big deal too. When I ran the DIA's Global Operations Center, I did the early bird, which was part of the president's daily brief, but he ran the whole shebang. He received the Intelligence Commendation Medal at his retirement, returning it in 2006 to protest the CIA's involvement in torture. So this guy's got a 27-year long career, back when the CIA, I think, had some good guys. And he's also got a lot of integrity, which, you know what I feel about CIAs and SEALs. That's a rare thing. He also founded the Veterans Intelligence Professionals, which is a great group that really kind of does what I'm doing. I'm America's intelligence officer. They're kind of America's intelligence officer watchdog, and they try and publish things that say, what you're saying isn't true. So he went to Fordham, which is a prestigious Jesuit university, by the way. Like I went to St. X, speaks Russian, literature, history, served in the U.S. Army, and he advised Kissinger and Nixon, and during the Ronald Reagan administration, he chaired the National Intelligence Estimates and prepared the president's daily brief. At retirement, he received the CIA's Intelligence Commendation Award, and then returned it in protest over the CIA torture. And that's the top award, except for a star on the wall, and you got to get killed for one of those. Without further ado, Ray McGovern, welcome, sir. Very honored to have you.
Thank you very much. We haven't talked before. Do you prefer Jeff or Jeffrey, or how shall I address you?
Either one's fine. I've been called everything under the book. So,
well, just a little comment on your introduction, which was very kind. There are a lot of people now at the agency who like to have my star on the wall. Okay, you know what that means.
Yeah,
it's a compliment, but it means you're dead, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed actually when I saw my former analyst colleagues drumming up manufacturing out of whole cloth evidence to justify war in Iraq, and that was my turning point. I couldn't abide that. Even less the torture and everything else that goes automatically with a war of aggression. At Nuremberg, Justice Roberts, I guess it was, he said, look, a war of aggression is the worst international crime because it holds within itself the accumulated evil of the whole. Think torture, think the other things that we were doing. So I was a little disappointed that more people didn't join Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, but by and by we had people from NSA and from DIA and from the Pentagon, from wherever you would want to have them. And we have a pretty good record now, about 3 memos to the president every year, and that goes back to January 2003, 2 months before the war started in Iraq. Needless to say, the president didn't listen to us. He listened to Cheney.
Yes. And I'll tell you, I got activated in 2003 to go to DIA and run their Global Operations Center. And so when we got in, there was a couple other, two other majors who had special forces backgrounds as well as intelligence. And we saw after the first 3 weeks, it was no longer, we won that conventional war, not that it was just war, but it had turned into an asymmetrical guerrilla war. And we were trying to relate that, and nobody listened to that. We're talking to the ODNI, because right there over at Bowling, it's not too far. I was at Clarendon, and I had guys at the Pentagon too. But
James Clapper, the DNI at the time.
Yes, and nobody wanted to hear that. Yes.
Yeah. Here's a little story about James Clapper. He was a favorite of people like Rumsfeld and Bobby Gates. Gates actually worked for me when he started at CIA. In any case, he was a very reliable, very pliable Air Force general. Okay, so what did they do when they were preparing for Iraq? They made this fellow, James Clapper, head of the Imagery Analysis Unit that used to belong to the CIA, as you well know, Jeff, but now belongs to the Pentagon. So they had the choice to appoint Clapper head of, now imagery analysis. Oh, that means all the stuff coming, not only photos, radar, infrared, multispectral, you could name a few others that I'm not allowed to name, okay? It was all coming down, it comes to James Clapper, head of the National Imagery Mapping Agency in those days, okay? It's now a little different. Anyhow, he writes a book after all this is over. He's out of, and he's hawking his book at Carnegie Institute. And I said, my God, I wonder what he's going to say about his role in the intelligence before Iraq. And I wouldn't mention this except it's so symptomatic. What happened was I got myself invited, okay, and I got there half hour before, and I bought the $26 down there. I bought the book, it's a big sacrifice, okay. Then I went into the men's room, went through the index. Oh, what's he say about Iraq? You know what he said about Iraq? He says, "Oh, Dick Cheney." This is in his book. Dick Cheney was leaning on us to find weapons of mass destruction, and so we identified 230 suspect sites, but we never actually. I have to admit my role in this, but and I regret it. But we intelligence professionals ended up finding things that weren't really there. We ended up finding things that weren't really there because of Q&A. So, Mr. Clapper, how do you explain that you found things that weren't really there? Well, there was a lot of pressure on us. And it's the antithesis of the way an intelligence operation should run. You tell the truth, for God's sake. And if Cheney dismisses you, you leave and you tell him why you left. You tell the whole world. So,
well, as I think Joe Kent has done, by the way.
What's that?
As I think Joe Kent has just done.
Yeah, Joe is an admirable species because not only did he quit the day before all this went down, but he told the whole world why he quit. It was because of Israel and Israel supporters with the White House and other people, and that's why. Okay. So, this may seem sort of gratuitous, but the old expression about how you win elections. It's the economy, stupid. Well, when people ask, why the hell did we get into attacking Iran with no plan and now foot soldiers? How did that happen? It's Israel, stupid. And the Secretary of State, also the National Security Advisor, and Joe Kent, and lots of people have said that explicitly. Why can't people know that? Well, the good news, in my view, Jeff, is that they're beginning to know that. And when you have 8 days ago, the New York Times, big photo, above the fold on page 1, with Trump and Netanyahu. I think I have Netanyahu arm in arm, okay? And you could see that it's both of them. And underneath there, what did it say? This will give you a little bit of an idea, okay? New York Times, the 8th, yep. Okay? How Trump took the U.S. to war with Iran. The whole article says how Netanyahu took us to war with Iran. I guess it was too much for the Times to say Netanyahu, but the whole article says exactly how it happened. They had the Mossad guy on the screen, and he was briefing, and all of Trump's sycophants didn't say, sort of like Brer Rabbit, right? He didn't say nothing, right? And then the next day, they said, well, no, we didn't really. And who did they tell that to? Maggie Haberman from the New York Times. In other words, they want a little, they knew this wasn't a really good idea. So they told her, this is crazy. So they go down in history as having dissented the day after. They should have dissented and said, look, Mossad guys, we know you're a really bright guy, but you're lying through your teeth. Go away. They didn't do that. And as most people are realizing now, Trump is he's vulnerable to pressure from Netanyahu. We could get into that later, but it's uncommon. I've seen a lot of pressure from Israel on U.S. presidents. It's never been this palpable or this strong.
Well, so I think we're on agreement, which we don't have to be. I'm happy to listen, and certainly with your credentials, but I think we seem to be right on the same sheet of music. Joe Kent's been on the show as well. But I do want to get into, of course, I think it's Netanyahu and Israel and Mossad. And I think, though, if you heard my opening, it's spiritually based. It's really on a belief system of greater Israel, which, if you want to get into scripture, was actually fulfilled already in Joshua 21:45, all the promises. but I'm a Christian chaplain. We don't have to go there. But I think that's why it's irrational, because there's no rationality for the U.S. to be involved in this. And I think there's a lot of Israelis who now are tired of being in bomb shelters. But what I want to hear from you is, and I've been retired since '09, and you longer, but I'm sure you have better connections than me. But I think there is just like in Congress and with the president, there is a great deal of infiltration of Israeli intelligence into our own institutions. And that's one of the first questions I want to ask you. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
Oh, of course, yeah. Even while I was on active duty with the CIA, for example, I used to brief Israeli analysts, but we had to go to a safe house way out somewhere outside of Washington. And the Israelis had full access to the Pentagon before Iraq. Now, when I say full access, I mean Israeli generals appearing in uniform and high politicians not even having to sign in, okay? One of our people in Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, Karen Katowski, was sitting there before Rumsfeld and Doug Feith's office and watching all this go on and listening to her boss repeat all this stuff about manufactured intelligence. And of course, that went right to Cheney from Feith, and Cheney went to Bush. And don't believe those people in the CIA. They don't know anything. Actually, what you should say is that Saddam Hussein has ties, operational ties with Al Qaeda. That way, you at least subliminally associate Saddam Hussein with 9/11, that plus the weapons of mass destruction, and we can depend on James Clapper to fudge that one. That should do it. And we were appalled. I mean, there were only 5 of us in the beginning that spoke out as early as January of 2003. But it was a first for us because, as I say, even the people that we had worked with had become so malleable and promoted on the basis of their malleability that they went along with this. And they won step awards and bonuses, cash bonuses, for telling lies about weapons of mass destruction. It doesn't get any worse than that. You know the profession. We tell the truth. At least that's why Truman set us up. Truman had this wonderful word. He says, I don't want treated intelligence. I want untreated intelligence. You tell me what you really think. This is why I didn't put you under the State Department or under the Pentagon. You tell me what you really think, and you're working for me. And so you have career protection for telling me what you really think. That was back in the day, okay? When Bill Casey came in and Bobby Gates, they promoted people on the basis of how much they hated the Communist Party, the Soviet Union, claiming that they would never, ever, ever give up power peacefully. And luckily, I was in a position briefing one-on-one for Reagan's first 4 years, the president's daily brief. So when Secretary Schultz, for example, would ask me, well, I've just been invited to visit Gorbachev. Your bosses say he's a phony communist. He's just as bad as all the others. What do you think? Sir, Secretary Schultz, you know that I don't always agree with my superiors, especially on Soviet foreign policy. And he would smile, because he knew that I had been through this, that I had been branch chief of Soviet foreign policy for many years, and that I had been overseas and so forth, and that I was in touch with people not only who knew which end was up, knew that Gorbachev was the real deal, that I kept in touch with them. And when asked, I didn't exceed I suppose I exceeded my prerogative a little bit. Here's another vignette. Weinberger, what a cold fish. I mean, I briefed him every other morning as I did Schultz. But, this one morning I thought, well, maybe I'll do a little, try to get a little empathy here. I said, "Oh, Secretary Weinberger, I saw that you were at my alma mater there just yesterday in the Bronx." He says, "Oh, you mean Fordham?" I said, "Yes, I went there." He said, "Oh, well, they have a fine law school, but up at the college there on Rose Hill, had these big banners that said, 'Don't buy bombs, stop bombs, stop the war.'" That was my first big challenge. How I reacted to that was, all right, that'll be enough for today. He never cottoned up to me, and he was a cold fish. I never cottoned up to him. So gradually, over a 4-year period, you gain the confidence of people like George H.W. Bush, vice president at the time, people like Secretary Schultz, people like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a wonderful guy, battlefield promotion during World War II. So it was just really, it was the acme of the intelligence cycle, because not only did I give them the fruit of the intelligence collection and analysis, but they would tell me what questions they had, and we would lay on more collection, technical or agent collection, and by the time I saw them the next time or the next week, we would have the answers to those questions. So that whole intelligence cycle, collection, evaluation, analysis, dissemination, came together in those one-on-one briefings. It was incredible. I miss it very much, but I still try to do that. Actually, I'm on Judge Napolitano 2 times a week, and I try to prepare as assiduously for that as I did during those 4 years, from 81 to 85, that for Reagan's first term.
Yeah, that's when I was commissioned in 84, and I went under Reagan, was doing some of the Contra stuff, and yeah, it was a good period. Although I'm no fan of Ollie North, but because what we were doing in 7th Special Forces Group, we were chartered to do. And what's a Marine colonel staff officer know about covert operations? Nothing. But you got a colleague there from Fordham, as G. Gordon Liddy, as well, another so-called hero by Fox News, I guess, which I'm not too pleased with either. But let's come back to can you historically say when Israel intelligence infiltrated American intelligence?
Well, it was always a case of the Israelis being 10 times smarter than any other Arab, right? Now,
yes,
there were people when I first came in. I came in 63 under John Kennedy, if you can believe it. There were people that were wise to this and were very perspicacious and very careful. So I learned that the Arab-Israeli branch was headed by a branch chief who didn't have any Zionists in the branch. Matter of fact, he didn't have any people of Jewish extraction in the branch. He had a whole bunch of other. He didn't have any Arabs, of course, but he had. So I asked innocently. I said, "Well, that's strange, No, it's deliberate. It's deliberate." Now it sounds un-American, huh? But my God, look what it is now. Look what it got into, this deep kimchi, So anyhow, as the years went by, the Israelis became our sort of favorite, our model, okay? And in 1967, this all came to a head. I was right on active duty. I was watching things from the Soviet foreign policy point of view. And all of a sudden, the Six-Day War broke out. And on the 8th of June, 1967, the Israelis attacked a USS warship called the USS Liberty in international waters, okay? After reconnoitering it for the whole morning, tried to shoot it to hell, to sink it, and I couldn't believe it. And the reaction at headquarters was, and then we learned that 34 sailors were killed. The reaction was, well, the Israelis are just going to do what they can. I couldn't believe it, okay? And now I know several of the Israeli survivors, okay? Several of the 34, 174 were wounded. They did it deliberately, and to their great pain, the United States government, U.S. Congress, and the U.S. Navy covered that up, claiming that it was just a great big mistake, even though we had intercepted messages. Pilot to tower. But these are American ships. That's an American flag right there. Follow your orders. I mean, hello. The evidence was clear. It was only Admiral Moorer, uh, a decade later or so, that did an independent investigation. And the truth is out, but nobody knows about it for obvious reasons.
I have somebody online who's saying, aren't you the one that called out the Liberty?
Am I?
Yes.
Well, I'm one of them. I wasn't the first. I learned about the Liberty. Well, this is a kind of interesting story. Just cut me off. I'm Irish, so I like to talk. All right. So here I am in Springfield, Missouri. Right. I'm on a. It's 2 years after Iraq. People are still interested in what I have to say and what my veteran intelligence professionals for sanity colleagues have to say. So I'm doing this tour of Missouri, of all places. I'm in Springfield. And I have an audience of about 300 to 400 people packed in this big church thing. Okay. So we talk about Iraq, and then at the Q&A, somebody says, now, Mr. McGovern, John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt have just done this article. They couldn't get it published in America, but it is in a London Review of Books. Have you read it on the Israel lobby? I'm wondering, have you seen it? I said, thank you, God. I just read it on the plane. And I said, yeah, I saw it. Gutsy thing. But they missed the most convincing proof that the Israelis have been given to believe that they can get away with murder, literally, to include 34 U.S. sailors. And then this is the teaching point here. I looked at this audience, and everybody's. And how many people know about the USS Liberty? 3 hands go up, one in the back, one in the middle, and one in. I looked at the guy in the first. He's a small guy. I said, now, how about you, mister? Can you get up? Ramrod straight, he stood. Gunnery Sergeant Bryce Lockwood, U.S. Marine Corps, head of the Marine Detachment, USS Liberty, sir.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
So I said, Mr. Lockwood, I know that the torpedo hit where your Marines were. I'm delighted to see that you're still alive. I'd like to know how. Would you be able to come up and talk about this? Sir, it's been 40 years now, and I have not been able. No, but I'm going to try tonight. It comes up. Talks about the whole thing. He was given these very sensitive equipment bags that with lead weights. That he was going to throw them overboard, right? And he was behind a bulwark when the torpedo. And he fished one of his guys out. The other one, he slipped out of it, went through the hole that the torpedo had made. It was just a poignant example of what he witnessed and how he was lucky in escaping death, sure death, but that this whole Marine attachment, fluent linguists in Russian, Hebrew, Arabic. I mean, these were really treasures for the USS Liberty, deliberately killed. You're probably wondering why they didn't finish them all off. Well, one very imaginative Navy guy got an inoperable antenna that the Israelis had not yet destroyed. SOS. Whoa! Israelis broke off the attack. The Sixth Fleet got the word, and they came to rescue the USS Liberty, and were called back by the Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, who called the admiral in charge to call those planes back. He had 2 carriers, right? They were all on their way. Call those planes back. And the admiral, to his great credit, says, I'm sorry, sir. One of my ships is has been attacked. I'll have to speak to your superior, McNamara. Well, he happens to be right here. LBJ gets on. I want you not to embarrass my Israeli allies. You call those planes back. You hear, Admiral? Boom. So, I mean, again, I'm glad you let me go into this late, because how clearer can it be? The Israelis know from example, tangible example, experience, that they can get away with murder, even if it involves U.S. troops. And that's going to happen now, unless we're smart enough to prevent Trump from being misled by Netanyahu into doing something really stupid, like putting Marines or the 82nd, I trained with the 82nd, onto land in Iran.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I've looked at those, what are probably the battle plans, and the most sensible one is the Tripoli, which does not have a well deck, so the Marines are not delivered amphibiouusly; they got to be delivered by air. But there's no real survivability, whether it's a beachhead or an airhead. Assault troops, I'm airborne. They got to be relieved. They can't, push out. And so they would just be missiled and droned. I don't really see a way. The first objective is, can we take it? And then once you answer that question is, well, can we hold it? I don't see how they could hold any of that. And I also don't see how holding any of it would, open the strait. Do you concur with all that, or do you have something?
Well, you used the word airhead in a different meaning. You have airheads running our Pentagon and our operations. No, yeah, I see
Beachhead for Marines, airhead for paratroopers.
Well, jarheads for reasons. Yeah, right. 82nd all the way, sir. Look, what's happened to the military is just disgraceful. This guy, Raisin Kane, I mean, Rumsfeld plucked him out, said, will you do whatever I tell you? And he said, yes, sir. Can I be chairman of the Joint Chiefs? Yes, for sure you can. I mean, he's from hunger, as we used to say in the Bronx. The others, Rubio, Hegseth is the enfant terrible. He's the real, he's crazy, okay? And he's got this Christian nationalism sort of thing, which is, I've never seen the like of it. So what we have is a Pentagon that's been ruled and ordered by these guys. Now, there was one hopeful sign that I haven't seen publicized anywhere, except that one time I saw it 10 days ago. That was the CENTCOM commander. His name was Voigt, or Vogt. I don't know if you remember that, but he spoke out and he said, look, when you're talking about unauthorized wars, the warriors are entitled, actually, they're required to refuse unlawful orders. The head of CENTCOM, just about 10 years ago, if memory serves. Had you seen that?
No, I didn't.
Isn't that interesting? I haven't seen it, but it's true. I've seen it. I mean, I'm not making it up like people in Washington make stuff up. So there is a feeling in the military that, this guy that gathered all the 4-star generals into this place in Quantico, and he's off his rocker. And if he wants to send us to certain death in Iran, maybe we shouldn't obey that order, the more so since it's unlawful and since it's a war crime, pure and simple, unlawful under U.S. law, a war crime under international law.
So what's your assessment that we are going to go into the Strait of Hormuz militarily?
I think it's almost certain that we will not. And the reasons are, the reason is, I think we try to send 2 destroyers in the day before yesterday, right? And we have the commo from the Iranians saying, turn around, last warning, turn around, okay? The Iranians are so prepared for this kind of thing. Look at the cliffs, for God's sake, on the Iranian side of this. And Oman, they're going to let this stuff happen. So I I think that Trump is really desperate to have some sort of agreement that can be disguised. You can put enough lipstick on this pig of defeat so that he can say, okay, mission accomplished. We won just like
I
I said.
agree. I agree with you totally, but I just don't think Netanyahu is letting him because Netanyahu. First of all, Netanyahu needs the Greater Israel to continue. Secondly, he won't be a wartime president anymore, and his corruption trial can then continue.
You're right. And that is the next thing that needs to be said. As soon as this little ceasefire was agreed upon, and thankfully, I think it's still in place as far as the US and Iran attacking each other. What did Netanyahu do? He attacked Lebanon full bore. I think
Right.
it was an hour later, for God's sake. Okay.
Yeah.
So now, who's leading this pack? Is Netanyahu in charge? Well, we know that Vice President, when he was negotiating, so to speak, with the Iranians, he got a lot of calls from Netanyahu. He got 11 calls, they say, from the White House. So, yeah, he was negotiating. Well, if he gave in just this much or showed that much flexibility, check it out with the White House. And they said, well, call Netanyahu first. And we go, okay. And then at the end, of course, as the Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi has said, we were getting pretty close. We were getting close. And then all of a sudden, boom, they threw the whole thing at us again. You know, this is fool me once, fool me twice. It's fooled me 3 times now, okay? The whole 9 yards. Now, it's very clear that Netanyahu was talking to Vance, okay? And Vance allowed it. The other, I called him exactly when I got on the plane going back. And Netanyahu said just 2 days ago, well, of course he called me. They call me all the time. I get a report from them every day. So, how do I explain this? I mean, Biden was bad enough tolerating, arming, enabling genocide, for God's sake. This guy, Trump, not only doing that, but attacking Iran and without a plan, and the New York Times admitting that was all at Netanyahu's urging, not by the sycophants that surrounded Trump and didn't say a word until the next day when they talked to Maggie Haberman, right? Okay. So if that's the case, what kind of hold does Netanyahu have on our president? I have come to believe, I suspected this 4 months ago when I told Judge Napolitano. I think Epstein figures into this. I think the extra measure that Biden didn't have, but the blackmail potential. I imagine that each time Netanyahu goes to the White House, he brings a little binder, and he shows some photos and reminds people about these links that show Trump with underage girls and so forth. And so now that's speculation on my part, but something has to account for his slavish devotion to Netanyahu. Makes no sense for our country. It only can make sense in the context of real blackmail material, maybe about his wife as well. And I've come to believe that's probably the extra element here. And my God, are we going to have a major war because of that? I don't know.
Well, you're saying you don't think we will go in, so that's great that we won't.
Well, I think our military is going to stand up now and say, despite what Brace and Kane tells you guys, this is suicide. We're the 82nd Airborne, but we don't do nonsense. We don't do real stupid things. This is what's going to happen if we do this. We're not going to do it. I think it's come to that. I may be wishful thinking. It probably is. But there's a reluctance.
Let me,
Yeah.
I've got a question that keeps coming up on T-Box on Rumble is, what do you think about Israel's control of our cyber network that surrounds our grid? I guess they're talking about 8200 mostly.
Yeah, that unit. Well, they have all the goods on all of us. I mean, it's the Israeli technology that's embedded in so many of our surveillance devices, and they know what we're doing. But that shouldn't deter somebody like, Rubio or the president or Vance. I mean, all right, so the Israelis know what we're going to do, and we say to each other, okay, we're going to tell the Israelis, forget about it. We're getting out, okay? Then they go tell the Israelis in person, forget about it. Stop in Lebanon. Now, I understand today that I think Trump promised a ceasefire for a week or so while Lebanon and Israel will create a deal here in Washington, Well, I'll believe that. I mean, I can believe that, but I should tell the Lebanese leaders, you know what you're getting into here. There's no real credibility to be given to Netanyahu. And I'm afraid to our negotiators, Witkoff and Kushner, my God, surrounding our vice president as if to say, we're here too. We're Zionists through and through, and we're responsible for this volte-face, for this this whole turnaround. Yes, we were near to an agreement, but it's not going to happen.
Well, they're not even official State Department diplomats. They're real estate. They're carving up Gaza, and as far as I'm concerned. But
Yeah, they carved up my home borough in the Bronx in New York.
really?
So I know these guys. They own the apartment houses where my friends live, for God's
Wow.
sake. Yeah, and
Well,
they had to pay exorbitant rent too.
so well, you're an old vet. You're airborne. So I think the rescue operation of the weapons systems officer, and I'm not the only one who thinks this. The first pilot rescue by PJs, I know a lot of PJs and worked with them a lot. I think that was valid. The WSO, this 44-year-old colonel that we still haven't seen, I think that was a cover for action for a tier one op to go get the uraniums out of the Natanz that failed miserably, which may be why Trump is now even more hesitant to send in military troops. You got any opinions on that, or is that?
No, you're right on that. I have some really good colleagues who keep up on that and know this in and out. That was a major operation. Now, I forget what the names of that pilot and that weapons officer are.
I don't think they've revealed him. I think the dude
Isn't
something
that,
call sign.
isn't that interesting?
Yeah, yeah,
Who the hell are these guys?
yeah. Where are they?
We
Why
can't
aren't they
even
at the
know
White
the
House?
name
Yeah.
of the pilot. And, I mean, the pilot was rescued right away. Where is he? What's his name? I mean, this is uncanny. Is that a state secret? So far. How about the weapons officer who allegedly broke his leg and then climbed up a mountain? Well, he's nowhere to be
He
seen.
made 100 miles in one day.
Well,
doing
there are supermen, but the whole thing is so phony. And yeah, what I'm saying here is, I believe you're absolutely true. There are these kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. Now, you need 90% for a weapon, okay? Does it take a long time to make 60%, 90%? No, it doesn't, okay? Is there evidence that they are doing that? No, there are no evidence in that. As a matter of fact, back in 2007, do the math, okay? Back in 2007, after the debacle in Iraq, the intelligence community was asked by somebody sensible, whoa, Iran is next. These neocons have Iran targeted. We need somebody to do an honest estimate on Iran nuclear. They looked hither and yon. They couldn't find anyone to manage it in CIA or DIA. They went to the State Department and luckily got this fellow named Tom Finger, who was head of State Department intelligence. He reluctantly agreed to shepherd this estimate. They worked all year. They were lucky. They got some information in between there, and they decided in November 2007 Iran stopped working on a nuclear weapon in 2003 and has not resumed work on a nuclear weapon. We say that unanimously, all 16 agencies at the time, and we say that with high confidence. Now, guess
I think
what?
they're still saying that. All agencies are still saying that, aren't they? I know
Up
DNI
until,
is.
up until this year. Now, every year since then, they have now what they call the annual threat estimate, okay? And so the head of national intelligence now testifies before Congress as required by Congress. And every year until this year, she repeated that verbatim. And last year she said, and besides, the supreme leader has put out a fatwa against this. Now, a fatwa is hard to understand, but it's really serious. It's not like an encyclical that, oh, that's nice. We could abide by that or not. It's a fatwa. Okay. Now, that was the first Khamenei. Now, what did they do? Oh, they killed him first day, right? And who's? Oh, it's his son. Oh, is he going to abide by his dad's decision not to build a nuclear weapon? Well, I think it probably will, but I'm in the minority there. Most people say, oh, now, of course they're going to. There's no evidence still. The telling point here, the teaching point is that Tulsi Gabbard avoided saying this year what she said last year. All she said was, we're watching the war here and what Iran might do. And she refused to say that there was a imminent threat.
Yes.
She said, oh,
I think Tulsi is one of the few cabinet members doing good work.
Well, I hope so, but there's very little evidence of that. There's a good argument where she should quit and tell the world what she knows. What she knew last year is the same as what she knows this year. She should tell the world, look, there was no imminent threat. We can't rely on a president unhinged as this guy to say there's an imminent threat when I, the head of all intelligence agencies in the United States of America, say there is no imminent threat, like Joe Kent said. So, in my view, I bought the argument that she should stay around just in case when Trump gets in extremis, he turns to somebody sensible and says, oh, hey, Tulsi, now come back in here, come back from those voter places in Fulton, Georgia, and tell me what's really going on. I think that's a fool's expectation now. I think she should quit, just like Joe did. Joe worked directly for her, right? So Joe says it. She should say it. Look, I should have told you guys before. There was no imminent threat. It was all Netanyahu's doing, just like Joe Kent told you very courageously. He tried to persuade me to say that. I should have, but now I'm saying that. It's a couple of weeks late, but there it is. That's what you should do, in my view.
So you don't think that we're going to put boots on the ground, which is great news, because I think both of us and anybody who's a veteran and a real patriot is really worried about it, because the situation is untenable. But you don't see an end to this either, do you? It's gonna be the next Ukraine.
Yeah. I have to tell you that no, I don't see boots on the ground, but I've been wrong so many times.
No, I'm glad to hear that. I've really been pushing, don't put boots on the ground in this. So it's going to be a bloodbath, and it's not a just war. There's no justification for this.
That's exactly right. And the
war
Pope is right.
From the American point of view. It's just Israel.
Yeah. And, as long as people start to realize that. Now, I don't think I said this yet, but I have been saying this every chance I get. Even the New York Times is blaming. Yeah, I did say that. And I guess I showed this. But, there is a turn here. The latest Pew opinion polls show that 60% of the American people distrust and have an unfavorable opinion of Israel, okay? And 59% have an unfavorable opinion of Netanyahu.
Yes.
Now, that is a sea change.
That
back in 2001, Netanyahu was recorded. He thought the video machine was off. You probably know he was recorded. He was in a living room from supporters, and the madam said, "Now, aren't you afraid that the whole world will turn against us?" And he says, and this is virtually verbatim, no, because the Americans, they can always be expected to turn in our direction. As a matter of fact, 80% of the Americans support us no matter what we do. That's incredible. End quote. Well, it is incredible. It was incredible. It ain't the case anymore.
Yes,
And
that's
that's
right.
important. That's really important because Jews for Justice there in New York, I was just in New York. These people are really strongly motivated to make sure that a distinction is being drawn between Zionists, which is a political movement, and Judaism, which has as its core, I think you mentioned this before, Tzidkah. This is the pre-Aramaic word for justice. And what does it mean? It means literally, not connotes, it denotes showing mercy to the poor. Whoa! Justice in the yeah, that's what the word meant, literally, showing justice to the poor. Now, we Catholics, I'm still a Catholic. I mean, every now and then, like 50 years ago, there were a bunch of good bishops appointed by John the 23rd, and they said, look, showing preference for the poor, that's us too. That's Catholic social doctrine. As a matter of fact, we talk about the preferential option for the poor. We're going to tell you what that is, say the bishops. What it means is this. No one is entitled to accumulate still more wealth than he or she does not need when others are deprived of the bare necessities of life, period. End quote. Got it? Well, that was not preached from the pulpits. It remained in a statement by the bishops in a what do they call it? Bishop's pastoral, right? So if now with the Pope speaking out in a very sarcastic way, what do you say? I'm reporting from on board here. He's ridiculing Trump. Anyhow, with the Pope speaking out and saying, look, sometimes you can tell when a war is unjust. Even Augustine's parameters are violated here, even if they obtain today. And so what? And so next time you go to the polls, you Catholics, don't vote for Trump or somebody like him. Last time around, 55% of the Catholics voted for Trump. That's, it really hurts, but that's the way it works. And I hope it won't be the case anymore.
Well, so I think the Pope used a 4-point decision for was this a just war. I also did a sermon on that too, that this is not a just war by Christian standards. But that goes with a question online here is if Trump calls off the straight attack, what is the retaliatory damage would Bibi resort to as a knee-jerk reaction to make it continue? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, in my view, if Trump, and it's a big if he told Netanyahu, look, we're going to settle this thing, and if you don't agree to abide by these arrangements, we're just going to get out of there and let Iran do what it wants to you. You know by now that when you appealed for us back in June to call time out because you were losing, because you were running out of missiles and so forth, I bailed you out. I got a timeout. This time, no timeout. So these are the terms. They're reasonable. It's just that you don't expand Israel and you don't defeat Iran. Take it or leave it. We're leaving. If he had the guts to do that, which is the only sensible approach, then that would do it, in my view. My problem, of course, is Epstein and all this other stuff that Trump feels he has to be cognizant of. And I just worry to hell that he'll be driven by these personal considerations to do something really stupid, like put boots on the ground.
From what I was also a DEA special agent while I was a DEA intelligence officer. So I was actually dual credentialed simultaneously. My day job was DEA. My reserve job was DIA. So I understand clearly the difference between analyzing intelligence information product and evidence, which is fact-based proof that goes in court. From what I've seen, and we haven't seen much, we haven't seen any video or anything, DOJ, FBI covers that up. But from what I've seen, I haven't seen anything very convincing of allegations of Trump doing pedophilia in the Epstein files. Am I wrong about that, or what do you think about that?
No one knows, least of all me. Um, what is known is that Maxwell and all these people were working for Mossad or the Israeli Defense Intelligence outfit,
Shin Bet.
and yeah, but it's really hard to know. Here is the former Prime Minister of Israel and the former Secretary of Defense, so to speak, living with uh, with Epstein in Manhattan. Uh, it's also incestuous that one cannot know the worst. This charade where the Department of Justice was supposed to release all this stuff and did such a haphazard job. I mean, you could see that it's just sloppy sort of thing. And then it was only half of the evidence suggests to me that there is really damning evidence. I, of course, don't know any more than the next person about this, but there has to be some extra handle that Netanyahu has on Trump. Matter of fact, the most moving thing was a former Mossad agent. His name is Ben Menashe. The reason I know him is he was very, very helpful when my mentor in journalism, Bob Perry, tried to figure out the October surprise back there when the Iranians wouldn't release the hostages. Menashe was really, really good. He's retired. He's got nothing, and he appeared with a really good interviewer about 2 months ago now, and he said, "I know what's there. I just wish that this thing would stop." He was talking about the genocide then. And, I would plead with President Trump, just confess, just say, all
Yeah,
right, I did these
right.
things, and then it would all stop. And he was almost coming in tears. This is an experienced intelligence officer who helped to run Maxwell and these people. So I take that as a real serious indicator that this is really, really awful stuff, awfuler, if you will, than most of the other stuff. It has directly to do with the president and perhaps his wife. That's more guess, but it's an educated guess.
Yeah, that makes it. I've advocated that except I've come out as a Christian. You self-reflect, you listen to the Holy Spirit, you repent sincerely, you confess, and then you ask for forgiveness. That's the Christic protocol that we follow.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, Trump's not Christian. He is, I think, Jewish. He said he's not Christian,
Yeah.
clearly, and I came out a while back and said he's Jewish before Mark Levin did. So he's not going to follow those kind of protocols.
Yeah, that's what really struck me about Ben Menashe's testimony. I mean, okay, you don't have to be Christian to realize that when you do something heinous, the only way to come to grips with it is to sort of confess and say, all right, that was then, and I'm going to try to. And so here's Ben Menashe saying that out of his own tradition or maybe by himself. I've come to realize that, well, I learned this the hard way. I'm speaking out in the Bay Area, right? And it was when torture was really came to the fore, when I threw my medallion for good service back at Congress. So I made a point of saying, torture, that the person I try to follow, Jesus of Nazareth, he was tortured to death. So, that was so later I'm back in the hills over Berkeley and I'm living with a very rich Jewish person. I'm staying with them. And he comes to me, he says, now, Ray, it's nice that you mentioned your Christian heritage and all that stuff, and that Jesus was tortured, but I'm a human being. I know that torture is wrong. For God's sake, I know that you never take another being, and so knock off that thing. And so I started reading about agnostics and what they call humanists. And what's that guy? The one that is the arch humanist. He wrote a lot of novels, his name will come to me. But he was asked one time, he said, now, what do you think of Jesus of Nazareth? And he said, well, I don't know if he was God's son or not, but if it weren't for the Sermon on the Mount, I think I'd just as soon be a cockroach.
Wow.
Kirk Vonnegut is the guy's
Good
name.
money. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
And he knew because he was captured by the Germans. He was in
Yeah.
Hamburg during the
Yeah.
worst bombing. He survived in a meat locker, and then his job as a POW was to come up and collect the remains of the German citizens that were firebombed every morning and try to find some plot of grass to put them under. So he knew life in a way that most of us, thank God, don't get to know. And he's saying, look, the Sermon on the Mount is what we're all about. And I like the last part of that, which says, "Blessed are you when people attack you." Because you're telling the truth, and the truth really hurts. Blessed are you, because they did this to all the prophets that went before. Now,
Yeah.
I don't claim to be a prophet, but I do claim to tell the truth, and that's kind of
Well,
reassuring.
I always say that intelligence and prophets kind of have the same fate. Nobody likes hearing the truth.
Yeah, Isaiah, you may know this. It's in the Bible. He walked around for 2 years stark naked.
Yep.
Okay. And people say, "What's going on here? What's this? You're embarrassing us all." He says, "Well, look at me. I'm naked. Your nakedness. You have deprived yourselves of the blessing, which with Yahweh has blessed you, a blessing of justice and truth. Your nakedness is far worse than mine." Wow. What a way to make a teaching point, right? Now,
Yes.
I don't suggest we all go out. We probably wouldn't look as good as Isaiah did. And in the end, I guess he was sawed in half. So I don't recommend that to everybody. But hey, let's not be naked. Let's be blessed by
But
the vision
that's
of
I love
justice.
that. So your spirituality underpins your morality, which directed your work as an intelligence officer. And I always like to remind people, intelligence work can be done morally. We just don't see it often anymore. But I think you're an example of that, and it's really nice that you bring out your Christian and Catholic faith in doing that. This has been really awesome. I'd love for you to come back in the future. I'd love to join VIPs as well. I don't know how you do it, but I'm certainly willing to. And I'm not much of a joiner, but I'd like to wrap up with your intelligence projection for whatever you want to do, 60 days, 90 days, the rest of the year, of what you see and happening for the United States.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I think that what I could add to this discussion is to broaden it out, to point out that in 1963, when I came on duty as an analyst with the CIA, my portfolio was Sino-Soviet relations, Soviet relations with China. Okay. At that point, they were loggerheads. They were shooting at each other across the border.
Yep.
They were really contending for leadership in the communist world. It took decades before they realized that this was really stupid. They were depriving each other of the leverage that they could have with the US and other people. Now it's 180 degrees. The Russians and the Chinese are joined at the hip. They have a virtual alliance in a long-term strategic document, okay? Just as a for instance here, people forget that before Putin invaded Ukraine, and I'll go on record as saying that he invaded Ukraine when he lost all the other options, having been deceived right and left with the Minsk process and all that stuff.
Yep.
Okay, before he did that, where'd he go? Went up to Beijing. Whoa, when was that? That was the 4th of February, 2022. Okay. So what was they were starting the Winter Olympics. Okay. It was prearranged, but he had really tight discussions with, with Xi. And I'm convinced, although all I have is logic, that he said, now, Mr. Xi, I get this problem, Comrade Xi. The Europeans, the Americans don't respect our core interests. They're broadening NATO. If they get Ukraine in there, that will be an existential threat to us. So I know that your whole philosophy is Westphalia. You don't attack another country. You don't occupy another. You don't do this. But I think I'm going to have to do that. And then I could see Putin thinking, "Oh my God, what's it?" And what does she say? You mean after the Olympics are over, right? No, I kid you not. They were over on the 20th of February. On the 21st, Donetsk and Lugansk declared independence. The next day, they were approved. The alliance
Wow.
was approved with the Duma, and 2 days later was the invasion. Now, there is a fallacy in logic: post hoc ergo propter hoc. You know what that means? In other words, just because something happens after something, it doesn't mean it because of that. But it was a factor, and it was a major factor because then the Chinese suspended Westphalia. And they started to talk not about Westphalia, but they started to talk about core interests. And what they said was, when a country, major country, has a core interest, they're entitled to defend it, all but saying, we support what the Russians have done in Ukraine. My God, that was a big turn. Now they came back to Westphalia about 3 more months, but that turned the key for me. And we have Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, in Beijing last 2 days. And if you look at his presser at the end of, I just read it this morning. It's about 15 pages long. It's really indicative of how close they've become and how they're really just trying to not incite Trump to do more crazy things, but to make him realize, look, the world is really different. Okay. The Soviets used to have a phrase you probably remember, the world correlation of forces. Okay. It's a balance of power 101. Okay. You don't want to, well, it used to be like this with the US and Russia. Actually, matter of fact, they used to say a triangle. It was a triangle, sort of equilateral, right?
Yep.
Russia, China, US.
Yep.
Now, if you remember geometry, it's isosceles. Big, big arm, Russia; big arm, China; short end of the stick, US. Now, the US is only slowly coming to realize that, but with BRICS and with all this stuff going to the east, we could see where the power is going to lie. The saving grace here, and I'll go on record saying this, is that we have a very gradualist, a very modest and slow-moving Putin and Xi. They realize they have the upper hand. They're not going to force things. They can outlive Trump. And meanwhile, they're not going to let Iran go down. So they're making that clear now in many ways. I hope that's one factor that will get through, if not to Trump, some of his advisors, that look, with Iran having allies like Russia and China, this is a different world. The Europeans are no help at all. We're all alone here. Let's tuck tail. Tell Netanyahu, go get lost and get out of there. That's my hope.
Wow, that opens up a whole nother. So I got to have you back to talk about that, because I think China's unrestricted warfare doctrine was enacted by the two Air Force colonels 20 years ago, and there's been an unrestricted war going on. But we'll have to talk about that on another
That would be
cast.
fun. Yeah.
Come back. But remind everybody where they can follow you at your website. I've published it on my Patreon and locals.
Yeah, I have a website. It's not hard to remember, raymcgovern.com. It's up. Actually, it's very easily searchable. And most people know me from my appearances at 10 o'clock on Monday and 4 o'clock on Friday on Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom YouTube channel. So, yeah, he has 750,000 subscribers, for God's sake. So I get a lot of exposure there that I never thought I would get at this ripe old age.
And I'm glad you're getting it, because I think you're making an effect. That's what I'm trying to do here with my little Rumble and YouTube channel. I think we're still both trying to serve our nation as best we can. So it's been great. It's an honor to have you, to meet you. Please, I'd like to have you come back. And thank you so much for coming on today.
Happy to do that, Jeff. Good luck to you.
All right. God bless. All right. So there is a very great intelligence officer, long serving, still serving, Ray McGovern. Go to his website, raymcgovern.com. Follow him with Judge Napolitano. And I was surprised there weren't more questions for him. Ray is great. Thanks for having him on. Ray, thank you for your service. Yeah, very cool stuff there, and some really good insights as well. So remember, a secret told isn't. No communications are secure, but they can be anonymous. All security is breachable. All codes are hackable. Concealment is not cover. All cover is temporary. Friendly fire isn't, and it is constant. It always happens. All codes are breakable. Use a one-time pad, one time. There's one on jeffreyprather.com in the shop if you need one. Looking is not seeing. Hearing is not listening. Moving is not action. Knowledge is not wisdom. Perseverance beats talent always. Power is not force. Hope is not a plan. Plans are useless. Planning is invaluable. Develop the situation before it develops you, as Delta Force Squadron Leader Pete Blaber said. Training is essential. The most committed wins. Freedom is never given. It is earned, fought for, won, and taken. So take it.